Welcome to Halftime, a show dedicated to equipping and inspiring people to accomplish what God has prepared them for. I'm Doug Piper, and I'm a Halftime alumni, and these webinars are part of my Halftime journey. Thank you so much for joining us. Halftime is focused on creating more significance in your life. So if you're feeling a bit that way, or you know somebody that's in that season, you can find out more by going to halftime.org. That is www.halftime.org, HALFTIME.org. And I'll also include that information again at the end of the program. So we're going to get everybody on screen here. There we go. So today we have Lloyd Reeb and dynamic Halftime alumni Chris Crane. Chris is a successful entrepreneur. He has led several organizations through times of crisis. He has a Harvard MBA and served 8 years as CEO of Comps Infosystems. During that time, he raised 4 rounds of venture capital, acquired 13 companies, and completed an IPO before being sold in 2000. Then he moved to Opportunity International as president and CEO, which is the world's largest microfinance organization with over 10,000 employees in 32 countries. Today, Chris is living out his passion for serving the poor and educated children as chairman and co-founder of Edify, which makes loans to Christian schools educating impoverished children in developing countries. Chris has been connected with Halftime for more than 15 years. We also have Lloyd Reeb, a successful real estate developer, author of 3 books, and the founding partner of Halftime Institute. And today we'll be going to be discussing a very timely topic, advancing your mission in times of crisis. So welcome everyone. I hope everyone is doing well.
Well, by God's grace, Doug, my family is well, and I welcome this opportunity for a moment back to, say, several weeks ago when there was normalcy, where I dressed up as business casual. I combed my hair, and in fact, it's been a long time since I've had a haircut because I was due right before my wife and I started self-isolating 3 weeks ago, so she decided that she would trim my hair today. I thought she did a pretty good job, and there's some kisses along the way with that hairstyling, the haircut.
Well, I think if we keep going like this, Chris, I'm going to look like Thomas Jefferson before long. You probably have shorts on underneath that dress shirt, though. Sitting in San Diego. Yeah, well, what a privilege, Chris, to do this together. You and I have been on this journey for more than 15 years, and I've watched you living out the principles we're going to talk about today. So this isn't just stuff you studied long ago. This is stuff you've learned in the trenches, leading organizations through crisis. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, Lloyd, many of us have been working from home for several weeks now, and our haircuts kind of prove that. But there's a lot of fear and uncertainty. How can we avoid the despair and instead pursue things that are more productive?
Yeah, well, you know, I love a quote from author Henry Nouwen, who's an amazing man of God that passed away a few years ago. And he wrote that an optimist speaks about concrete changes in the future, but the person living with hope is living in the moment with the knowledge and trust that all of life is in God's good hands. And so what we want to do today is combine this sense of living with hope, knowing that all of life is in God's good hands in these times, with really practical ways that you can respond. And many Halftime alumni and many of the people on this webinar are deeply invested in not only their businesses and nonprofits, but ministries, and frankly facing drops in revenue, crisis, and having to decide who to let go or lay off or furlough. and still serve people at the same level. And so we want to explore, how can you not only survive in this time, but do it wisely, and maybe even position your ministry strategically to flourish coming out the other side of it. And so that's what we're going to try to do. And Chris and Doug and I, over the next 30 minutes, is take that apart. And together, we're going to look at some things like, sort of strategically looking at how you reduce expenses that may be different from what you did in your business when it comes to a nonprofit, which is about life transformation. Innovating, around client services during a lockdown, and how do you do that when your staff are running as if their hair is on fire? And then forming kind of a street smart advisory team, maybe separate from your normal board, who can come in and triage, that have unique abilities. And then using this lockdown to do what Chris is best at, which is governance type things that are often let go when you don't have a hiatus. And then obviously, most importantly, seeking wisdom from the Lord. And in James 1, God says, whoever lacks wisdom, let him ask of me, and I give it to you without holding back. So that's the big idea. So Doug, set us up for how to navigate the site here today.
I certainly will. Well, we appreciate everyone joining us today, and we appreciate your time. Lloyd, our next webinar or live stream will be with Edgar Sandoval, and we hope that you can join us. That's coming up in about a week. I would encourage you to continue the conversation by asking questions down at the bottom center of the screen. There's an ask a question there. It looks like we've already got one. We also have a poll there, and the poll is particularly important for this event because we're going to gauge what we talk about based on the input in the poll. So if you don't mind, it's one choice. It will take just seconds to respond to. The chat screen, we would love. I see a lot of activity there on the chat screen, which I'm glad to see. I see Aaron and Russ and a whole bunch of other folks. Please use this chat screen. It's a great way to kind of share amongst the audience where you are in your journey. And it's just a great way to stay in contact and network as we love to do with Halftime. Note, the internet is stressed pretty good right now. So if the webinar is not playing correctly, refresh your browser window. That almost always fixes things. If you can't hear, double check you've unmuted or tuned up your speakers. Everyone that registered will get an email with a link to the recording. And at this point, what I'd love to do, Lloyd, is look at our poll and see if we've got some answers there and see kind of how it's trending. So it looks like it's moving as we talk, but without a doubt, the 60% right now and probably trending up say using. So the question is, for those that haven't looked, please choose the most important topic to advance your mission during this crisis. And 57% of our audience is saying using the downturn to strengthen foundation for the future. Now, our second in that is innovating to serve clients during lockdown. And the third level is, and it's kind of moving, but seeking the Lord's wisdom during the pandemic. So I think if we focus on using the downturn to strengthen foundation for future and innovating to serve clients, that's where our audience is right now. So again, if you've not voted, please put that in the poll.
Thank you, Doug. So, crisis has historically been a place where Christians can shine through compassion. It's the light of what God has done in our lives and the love that overflows from Him to us, to others, that shines bright in a dark backdrop. And not only do Halftime Alumni have successful businesses, but often we're in positions of leadership that give us a platform to not only bring compassion, but to bring a reason for the hope that's in us, to be salt and light. And like Jesus said, the great commandment, love your neighbor as yourself, and the great commission, to go into all the world and share the message of his love and compassion. I believe that Halftime Alumni, like you and I, are uniquely equipped to respond in a time of crisis like this. And one reason is because you've taken the time to get clear on your calling. There are so many needs in the world right now that when you're not clear on your calling, it's hard to know where do you start. But because you've come through Halftime, you're clear on your calling. Now, let me just take a side note and say, if you haven't gotten clear on your calling, we can help you. Even in this time of crisis, we have a simple package of coaching one-on-one that within 2 or 3 calls, you may be surprised at the amount of clarity you could gain about how to respond using your calling in this time of crisis. But secondly, you've begun to create margin. One of the key things that we focus on in the Halftime Institute is that no margin, no ministry. I have to create capacity. If I spend all my time, energy, and money on me and my family, I have nothing to offer you. I have nothing to offer others that are in deep need right now and suffering and need all kinds of creative solutions, not only financially, but also health-wise. And then thirdly, the third reason we're uniquely equipped is because our hearts have already been turned outward. This is not a new season for us. We've been looking for ways we can serve. And so when you're clear on your calling, you've created margin, time, and money, and talent and resources we can offer, and your heart is leaning outward to serve others, not just my own family. That's a unique blend of attributes that position you and I to be able to respond. And we're 3 or 4 weeks now into this crisis. And my guess is that you and your management team have already made a lot of adjustments. And secondly, you've begun to grieve some of the things that you're giving up, which is an important part of this process. And then thirdly, it may have turned our hearts back to the Lord in deeper ways where we're listening more keenly to the Spirit of God. So this is an opportunity to not only use this crisis for good for those around you, but today we want to move beyond that to using this crisis to advance the mission that you're on. And so Chris chose these 5 topics thoughtfully together so that we can best bring to you what we think might be most meaningful. And so Chris, take us into these 5. Give us a quick kind of overview first, and then maybe Doug, freshen us up once Chris has done that with where the poll sits, and then we'll focus on those 2 or 3 issues.
Thank you, Lloyd, and everybody listening. It's a great joy to be with you, even during this terrible crisis. I will go through the 5 points very briefly, and then we'll focus on the 2 that you have indicated are most important to you. But I'll start off first with the last one mentioned, but seeking the Lord's wisdom on decisions during this pandemic. You will get advice from numerous people, often conflicting advice. It can be very different on the spectrum. And the key is to have the best advisors you can, be accepting of this conflicting advice and take it to the Lord. Seek the Lord in prayer. Perhaps I encourage prayer and fasting, and get a sense of what the Lord is directing you during the very important decisions that you will need to make during the crisis. Reducing, back up to number 1, reducing expenses to survive. Many of you have experience in this, and probably many of you have already applied for the new Stimulus Act, CARES Act, which has a payroll protection program. Most of the nonprofits I have spoken with have applied. Hopefully that does come through, and it's a 1% loan, but if you use more than 75% of it for payroll, then it's forgiven. So it's 2.5 months of payroll. So that's one way to avoid letting people go, laying off valuable employees, and gives you more runway. We'll know so much more 2.5 months from now. And there are many other points that I have on that, and I will get those to Lloyd and to Doug so they can distribute those to you. But just I'll allude to one. As you do your forecast, you do your realistic, your pessimistic, and your worst case. a crisis advisor I once had said, okay, Chris, you now have your worst case, plan for something worse than that. That was in the financial crisis just 12 years ago. And so at that point, you're looking at these employees, your staff members who you've worked closely with. Your heart goes out to them. You have say a 30-year-old manager, that middle manager that's done really well, but the role that he or she now has doesn't look particularly valuable, and so you're looking at having to lay off that person, or I bring back the emotion right away of a 22-year-old single mom who was recently hired. And so my HR department was saying, gee, let go of the people most recently hired, go by seniority, as well as let go low performers. And wow, my heart just went out, and I just said to HR, find a way that she can be valuable to us. She's not going to get another job in this situation. And at that time, unemployment benefits, she would have been really struggling. So we were able to keep her. But it's those very difficult decisions. And so my prayers are with you that the Lord is leading you on each one of those, and you are close to the Lord as you are making those important decisions. Innovating to serve clients during lockdown. Just an overview, if you are paying your employees through the payroll protection plan, or you've decided these employees I'm going to keep paying, demand from them that they are thinking of ways to serve clients, that they're not falling into, we can't do business the way we've been doing business, so therefore we'll just wait for this to pass. No, that's unacceptable. How can you serve clients? How can you make a difference? There are ways. Come up with them. I will not take no for an answer. You can't say no, it can't be done. There are ways it can be done, and pursue that. Forming a crisis team of advisors to help you through the pandemic. And by this, I mean having people who have been through layoffs and other crises in their business who can really give you advice. And there are, of course, full-time crisis consultants that help organizations to get 2, 3, 4 people who have in-depth experience in going through various crises. So these are probably not your board members, probably not your vice presidents, your senior management team. These are more likely people that you know, or maybe some that you don't know. Perhaps you're paying some, and others, because they love your ministry, are donating their time, but can help you navigate. You can bounce off your thinking with them as a sounding board, so they give you the best advice from their experience of having gone through. Using lockdown time to strengthen your organization in the future. There are 6 points I'll make on that, but an overview. If the lockdown right now is giving you, as the senior leader, more time, then look for what are those things in governance and other areas of your organization that you wish you could have done, you should have done before, but you just never had the time. They're important, but never urgent. Now you can make them high priorities and get those in place to form a stronger foundation, and we'll go through those. And so those are the 5 that we've mentioned. Lloyd or Doug, does that, in the additional time that we have just had since our participants have been polling, do we have a clarity
tell us about
on
the Doug? Tell us about the poll, Doug.
All right. It really hasn't changed. So our audience today is very focused. Almost 50% are mostly interested in hearing using the downturn to strengthen the foundation for the future. And pretty much the second one is innovating to serve clients during the lockdown. All the others are pretty small percentage. So innovating and using the downturn, I think, should be our focus. And that's just a reminder, if you have a specific question that you would like to ask, just click on the Ask a Question field. You can submit it. And in the second half of our program, Chris and Lloyd will answer your questions.
So, Chris, let's think of it this way. Let's suppose, Edify is churning along and your management team is doing a good job. You feel like they're as innovative as they could be. And you've already done the cost cutting. So you're down to bare bones. And now you're sitting there in your home because you're quarantined. And it's beautiful sunshine outside in San Diego. So you sit out on the back patio with a blank pad of paper and you start. Okay, what should I be doing now to strengthen the foundation, the core, and the governance of my organization? So coming out of this, we're stronger than we ever were. Where do you start? Take us deep inside your thinking as if you were just stream of consciousness so we can learn from that.
Great, Lloyd. Thank you. I would start with some issues that are, over the long term, are of great importance to every organization. So the one I would look at is my board of directors and be planning for the future by using a board skill map. And perhaps many of you already use board skill maps. Perhaps some are basic and some are sophisticated. I have found that using a board skill map of identifying the skills that we would like to have among our board members is extremely important. And then as a new prospective board member is considered hear about the board governance committee on our board will try to evaluate based on the person's background, what skills do they have that we are looking for? And then with the skill map, with all the board members up there, we can see if this person is filling gaps or if the person is simply redundant with good skills that already exist in other board members. And I've been blessed to be associated with Hope International and on their board of directors most of the last 10 years, and they've come up with a very sophisticated board map, and then we adapted it for our purposes. But I will get that to you so that you can, if you use that as a template, that can be distributed to anyone in the audience who is interested. But having a sophisticated, and that particular board skill map rates each board member on a 0 to 5 scale of how much skill they have in a particular area. And that often is done in context once the person's on the board, then so that we really can fine tune the gaps that we need to fill on the board. But I think your board of directors is, I can't underestimate how important they are of having good board members who understand good board governance is so helpful. And if you have board members that don't understand good governance, you don't have a chairperson that doesn't understand really the line between policy issues where the board should focus and operating issues where management should focus. The board of directors can be dysfunctional and not advance the organization's mission, can actually, I think, hold back a mission. So picking good board members that understand best governance practices and bring the skills you need. So at Edify, we do not look to hire or to bring on or appoint board members that are our biggest donors. We don't have any of our biggest donors on the board or that are famous. We don't have any famous people on the board. We look at people who we believe to be the best contributors to our board to advance our mission. Another area very important, especially obvious with this crisis we're in, is enterprise risk management. McKinsey & Company, the large worldwide consulting company, has written a white paper on this, and I'll forward that information to Doug and Lloyd, but it is a great guide for doing really good enterprise risk management. And then looking at, what are the greatest risks we have? What could impact us the most? What are the most likely to happen? And then what are the indicators that problem or risk to us is happening? And you can think ahead of the steps you will take to address those issues. So again, often not done in the normal course of business with the tyranny of the urgent, but very important. I also see this as a great time to spend individual time with your senior executives and even some of your middle managers. If you're the CEO, you're on the phone with them, you're hearing, you get a chance to hear more about their families, really develop the relationship further. You will get to know people in a much deeper level because your conversations will not be particularly rushed during this time, but that you can hear about their hopes and their dreams and what they hope to do in the organization, what their ideal or wished for career path is. That could be very helpful time with the executives. I would also look at setting up guardrails to make sure that you stay true to your mission. So many organizations, it's more the norm than the exception, drift from their mission or their founder's intent. And so there is an organization called On Mission, and I will give contact information for them, but they've done Mission to True assessments every 2 years at Edify, and our board of directors has found these extremely helpful to see how well management is staying true to our mission. Also, succession planning. It's one of the 10 most important functions of a board to make sure that there is a list of people who are good candidates to succeed the CEO in case something happens to the CEO, hit by a truck or gets a disease or other things that happen. They're no longer available. And I like to bifurcate succession planning into long-term candidates, and then who it might take 3 months, 6 months to find them, identify with them, convince them to join as CEO of your organization. And then the second level is intermediate or interim candidates. So someone who could step in right away. It might be someone from the board of directors, or it might be the executive vice president of the organization. But at least you've done that succession planning. So if something does happen, that it will be much less disruptive to the organization. And then lastly, I'd say, as individuals, think about where you want to be at various points in your life. So if you're 40, maybe at age 50, you want to be with your same organization. Where do you want it to be? If you're 40, maybe you're thinking about, at age 60 or 65, where do you want to be? And that might be a very different use of the gifts, especially since you've had more experience and just learned a lot more from the time that you have spent managing. So, and I think we'll see an example of that when Lloyd and I talk about my personal journey somewhat. So,
and Chris, maybe just to keep to our 30-minute first piece and then switch to, maybe what we'll do is take the innovation topic as a question just after the 30-minute mark. And then I want to wrap up this 30-minute segment in our commitment to letting people go at 30 minutes with an extension of what you were just saying, your own journey. And I remember when you left Opportunity International, you and I had started into what I called Halftime 2.0, our journey together of coaching conversations over the course of 18 months. And I remember asking you once, Chris, who do you want to be? At the time you were 58, you were, 58. And I remember saying to you something like, Chris, who do you want to be at 68? Just so that you would think ahead and not end up 10 years from now kind of flat-footed or back at the same place again. And then the secondary question was, what do you need to do between now and then in order to prepare to be that person, to live out that role in those remaining years? So maybe just talk a little bit about that, because that's positioned you really well for this topic of bringing wisdom to younger entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs in particular. So maybe take us into what your calling is and why that's emerged over the last 8-10 years.
Well, Lloyd, during my valuable coaching sessions with you and the thoughtful probing that you did, you articulated something that I hadn't, that I am passionate about mentoring Christian social entrepreneurs who are running ventures that may change the world. And I remember well when you asked me a question that changed my life. You said, Chris, what if there is a way that you could have much more impact during your 10 years between age 70 and 80 than you've had in all of the prior years in your life? And I said, wow, Lloyd, you've really caught my attention. How could that be? So you continued and you said, what if you were to mentor 50 highly capable Christian social entrepreneurs during that 10-year period? Mentor them at different times, obviously not all 50 at one time. And then what if a dozen or so, maybe 25% of them, that you could really make a difference in the trajectory of their organizations, that they would grow faster than without having advice from you. They'd even grow 5% faster. And so, having been a finance major, I started the numbers, and then after our conversation, I got out my calculator. But I think we all know that the term of the magic compound interest. And if I could help these dynamic Christian social entrepreneurs grow at 20% a year, 15% a year, 5% more, but they did that over 30 years, that results in a tremendous difference from that compound growth rate of an additional 5%. In effect, they would have impacted almost three times the people growing than to just 15% a year. And so I thought, wow. And then you see a lot of these social entrepreneurs quite a bit younger than I, so they'll be working for 3 decades, some of them 4 decades with medical advances, so that will go on for many, many years. That caused me to an entirely new vision. I'm very excited about how I could pour myself with the experiences and the skills that the Lord has given me into others, so that they can many more long after.
So, Chris, let's stop there. And your camera froze for some reason, so maybe log on, back on, and I'll just tell folks what to do if that interests them. So here's the thing: is if you're listening to Chris and you can see, gosh, he's run tech companies, he's run big NGOs and startups. How can I tap into his wisdom? He's really committed to being a sage to the smartest and the brightest Christian social entrepreneurs in America. And Peter Drucker taught us that you move from warrior to king to sage. And it sneaks up on you, the sage role. Many of you are in that sage role, I know. And it sneaks up on you. You don't necessarily notice it until someone else maybe points it out to you. But if this would, he is building a tribe of younger, smart social entrepreneurs so they can learn from each other. And if that interests you, you can just email Chris at ccrane@edify.org. ccrane, CRANE, @edify.org. So Doug, maybe just wrap up our 30-minute segment so people that have to leave can, and we always try to honor that commitment. And then Chris will be back on in a second, and we'll go through some of these questions. There's
Absolutely.
Chris's smiling face.
Well, good. That will be a great transition. So, Chris, we're going to transition to the questions in just a moment. Unless, Lloyd, there's a final word that Chris wants to say before we transition to that.
Yes, thanks, Doug. Just on clients during lockdown, we all know Isaac Newton and the Black Plague occurring in 1660. And so Isaac Newton was a student at Cambridge University. So he was told the university closed down. And so for a year, he was on lockdown. And it turned out that was productive years of his life. During that time period, he degree, and also developed the beginnings of calculus. Isaac Newton termed that, I've got a quote, that the year of wonders. And so there was lockdown, didn't have internet, just had to focus it on whatever he could. And he extremely Israel. Paul wrote most of his letters, comprising much of the New Testament, while he was in prison. So telling him like this with employees and telling them they have to come up with ways they work among themselves, and they will come up with innovations, some of which will continue using for years after the pandemic is over, because they're more. So this is at Edify that we're doing. We have an executive with us who was a professor of education, and she's very creative. And so, we have our school, all the 11 countries where we work, schools locked, they are closed out. So this is a great time to do training. People have access to, they have access to video. So we can be doing teacher training to help the teachers. We training entrepreneurs who we work with, who generally don't have much of a business background. And this is a great chance to do that. And then some of the teachers can be calling up students, putting out text message, emails saying, here's a Bible chat. I want you to read this and send it as improving of their writing skills. Of course, they're discipled in Jesus Christ. So this time can be very productive for almost all organizations if they say, we are going to innovate, we're going to come up with new ways to do things, which are even more efficient than when we had access to face-to-face meetings.
Good. So Doug, first of all, any suggestions on Chris's sound, do you think?
Yeah. And for the audience, I apologize. The internet, as we know, has been stressed beyond maybe what it has ever been had to handle before. So depending on our situation, we lose it. Chris, I am going to disconnect you. So if you don't mind reconnecting, and we're going to go ahead and move into the questions. But before I do that, for those of you that joined us, we did see Chris for a large part of this. And so we will have a recording of this. We're going to move into the questions. I see that we have 3 questions, and Chris will hopefully come back and join us in just a moment. But if you need to leave, we understand that, and we will move into the questions in just a moment. So I did want to mention we do have a live stream planned for next week with Edgar Sandoval. Sorry, you can't read that. Let's see. We'll try that a little bit again. How about with Edgar?
Yeah, and Doug, let me talk a little bit about
a great program. I know.
Doug, let me talk a little bit about Edgar, if that's okay.
Absolutely. One moment.
This is kind of the thought we have with Edgar is he was born in relative poverty, came to this country, has an incredible mind, and got a world-class education, went to Procter & Gamble, and became their global head of feminine products, and just felt called to serve the poor. And so today he is the CEO he came through the Halftime Institute. I remember watching him share his story. I was friends with Rich Stearns, who was running World Vision at the time. And Rich asked me if I could help find somebody like Edgar to take his role. And so I introduced Edgar to Rich Stearns. And today he's running World Vision. I think they have 49,000 staff serving millions of poor kids. 17,000 kids die every day of preventable causes, and Edgar's at the forefront of tackling that. So it's going to be a really moving opportunity to see and learn about fragile state poverty and what you and I can do to be a part of that. So let's go to question 1. Well, we've got Chris here and Crisp on camera. Doug?
All right. Welcome back, Chris. Can you hear me okay? Chris, can you hear me okay? Oh, let's see. Looks like his mic is up. Chris, check your mic. It looks like it's off. There we go.
Is it on now?
Yes, sir. We
Good.
got you. All right. Are you ready for a question?
Indeed, please.
All right. Thank you for your perseverance. Give us an example of the kind of person that you've used on your crisis advisory team.
I'm thinking of a 500 CEO who had all sorts of crises, global operations. So when Trina happened, they had employees in New Orleans, and there were a few that were missing. They've had hurricanes in the Caribbean where they had employees and some were so. And he did through all of the. He's probably older than I, so numerous downturns and recession in the regular economy plus specific industry. So he was just a tremendous a resource for me in sounding board for also giving me ideas that I hadn't considered. So that's a person who I benefited greatly. And he was a big believer in having the realistic, pessimistic, and worst scenarios, and then planning, and then having yet plan for something that your worst case, and what are you going to do when the indicators are there that it is going to be the situation to your organization is going to be worse than the worst place.
All right. Chris, we still don't have your camera, but if you're okay, we're going to keep going and hope it returns and get your.
Let's do that.
All right.
Great. Let's do.
All right. So our next one comes from Jay, and Jay asks, I have been advising my business leader friends to make taking care of your employees a high priority. The return on investment in your people in times of crisis will be high. Do you have any comments on that?
I do. Your employees are extremely valuable. How good your employees are, motivated, are good a culture fit they are, how much affinity they have. Being an employee is of paramount importance. So again, using this time to connect with employees, but also it's very easy sometimes with some advisors will say, gee, lay off 30% of your staff. Normal times are going to return. Hopefully you're going to grow from where you left off and grow to leaps and bounds there. And to do that, you need outstanding employees. And it is I define an A player as really good attitude, is a really good culture fit, and is passionate about what the organization is doing. And so you have people like that all four can long and hard before to be creative, give them additional responsibilities or tasks to do, forward planning, or whatever it may be, as best you can, those really high performing employees. And if you possibly can avoid layoffs during this time, a lot of organizations don't have the financial runway to do that, but that will generate tremendous loyalty. I'm thinking of a home builder, and back, I think it was in the 1992 recession, the early 90s, which was a very severe recession. And he asked his employees, quite profitable, to use their reserves to keep. So they may have, might have asked everyone who above kind of low to take a 20% pay cut. Perhaps senior execs took maybe a 33% pay cut, then middle managers took a 25% pay cut. Others might have taken a 15%. Your lowest level employees can't afford to take a pay cut. And there was tremendous loyalty generated as a result. sacrificing some of the company to keep people. And the market came back extremely well, and they had so they could take advantage of opportunity.
So, Doug, I think we should stop there, just because it's hard to hear Chris, and we'll share the tools that he mentioned. And here's what I'd like to end with is that you and I have been put in positions of leadership and platforms that we can use for good. And we want to help you be as creative as you possibly can. We want to connect you with other people who can help you be creative. I have spent the last 4 weeks literally day and night connecting talented leaders like Chris with other leaders around this country and around the world that are working on things that they could help each other with. And so if you're tackling something with your ministry platform or business platform that you need someone with specific help with, I encourage you to reach out, and you can just email me at lloyd.reeb@halftime.org. So lloyd.reeb@halftime.org. And even Chris and I are working on finding a way to recapitalize several thousand employees for a ministry, a business ministry in Africa that we think is going to relaunch those people at the back end of this crisis. So think creatively, see how we could connect you with other people. If you think about the clarity Chris has around his calling, if you don't have that clarity, we want to help you with that as well. So, Doug, anything else before we wrap up?
No, I think at this point, what I'd like to do is thank everybody for your time. I apologize for the internet issues. Unfortunately, I'd like to say we can resolve those, but I think we're all aware of failed online meetings. So unfortunately, we're experiencing that this time. So we do appreciate your time. We appreciate your patience. We will have another one this time next week with Edgar Sandoval. And this is recorded. And again, we just appreciate everybody's time. We hope you stay safe and stay healthy, and look forward to hearing from you and seeing you again next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.